Kelsey, you're now live to Facebook.
Okay, we'll get going at 6:30 then. 1 minute.
Kate, you got your computer fixed?
I did. Emily fixed it all up. I don't have any more gremlins till they show up again.
All right, I have 6:30 here, Mr. Knopper, so we'll get underway. I'll call to order the special council meeting here on Monday, November 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Once again, we are doing it on Zoom and airing through Facebook due to COVID-19 restrictions. You can email any comments you have to pnopper@townofstanders.ca, and Mr. Knopper will make sure that that's contained within the actual live feed so people can submit them at any point throughout tonight's meeting. First and foremost, let's get into the recording of attendance. We have all members of council in attendance, so thank you very much, council. And I'll look for, before we approve the agenda, I was actually wondering if you would, if someone would move to amend it. I'd like to add under new business, just a brief conversation on the white paper. Just a very brief one, because there's a couple of things that I just wanted to discuss with council, and figured a timely response would be better. So if you just want, I'd say under new business, white paper conversation would be probably suffice. So if I could have someone move to amend, that would be great. I see Councillor Heenan and seconded by Councillor Akaji. Any discussions on that amendment? Okay, all in favor of approving the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that's everybody. So the amendment has been approved, and now let's approve the agenda with that amendment, the whole agenda. So let's have a mover for the approval of the agenda. Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Hurdle. Any discussion on anything else regards to the agenda? Okay, all in favor of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That is everything, everyone. Thank you very much. So disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there anything at this point? Seeing none, if anything comes up, just let us know. Under presentations, we're moving, and we have Xander with us today. Mr. Gopin, appreciate you being here. And as everyone knows, he's the senior planner with the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. He's going to be, as per our request, doing a little bit of a presentation on the changes to bylaw Z2104, which is a zoning bylaw for the town of St. Andrews. We discussed briefly some of the changes, but we asked, since there is some significant ones, for a more detailed presentation so we can all understand, you know, when it gets back to certain changes, what the impacts will be, in particular when it comes to housing is the one that jumped out at me. But I'll pass it on to you, Xander.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Always good to be here with yourself and the rest of council. So I'll just share my screen, and I have a pretty quick presentation. A lot of the changes are just very minor, and you can read them yourselves. I don't think it's worth getting into most of them, but there are some bigger ones, mostly that relate to housing, and definitely worth talking about them. And I guess this came about because you know, we've had this Z2101 has been the zoning bylaw in effect for almost a year now, or maybe I think it came into effect in March, and there's been enough time to kind of realize, like, oh, you know, there are a few things here and there that didn't, you know, maybe we're contradicting each other, little typos, things like that. So we were initially thinking that, but then since we were going to have the bylaw open, and since council had set housing as one of its, well, its #1 priority, and obviously there's a lot of work that council's been doing in terms of the RFP process and meeting with developers, that's moving that priority forward. But the zoning bylaw does play a role in what people are allowed to do, and Z2101 I think was a really, it actually itself pushed housing forward in town. And some of these changes are because of those changes, and we realized, okay, these are working, let's go further with them and see what we can do. So with that, I'll jump into the presentation and first talk about accessory dwelling unit size. So Your accessory dwelling units are one of the changes we made for Z 2101 was to allow accessory dwelling units in pretty much every residential zone, and to expand what they meant, and not just limit them to basement apartments or other kind of interior uses, but also allow them outside the home, so garden homes, in detached garages, and we've actually seen a fair number of these be developed. So people are adding rental units in their backyards in some cases, but they're limited to 645 square feet right now, which it's not incredibly small, but we have seen a few variance requests to go bigger. And the current accessory structure maximum, so if the accessory dwelling unit is contained within, let's say a separate detached unit, then it's an accessory structure, or an accessory use, a secondary use in an accessory structure. It's limited to that accessory structure itself is limited to 904 square feet. So if you just want to have an accessory dwelling unit, you can't go all the way to 904 square feet. You have to limit yourself to 645 square feet. And so we've seen a few variances related to that. So the proposal here is to increase that maximum to 904 square feet so that they're aligned. And if really it's just giving people more options of what to do with that 904 square feet that their accessory structure is. So in the case of a detached garage, you're still limited to 900. You would still be limited to 904 square feet. It's just you could play around with the space a little bit more. Maybe instead of having a 2-car garage, have a 1-car garage, and have extra room for the accessory dwelling unit. So the outside of accessory structures would not change very much. It would just allow property owners, when they already have 904 square feet to have for a structure, why not allow all of that to be for residential use, or a greater portion of it to be for residential use? So in my opinion, this wouldn't change the visual character at all of town. The setback requirements would not change. And it would just, again, allow property owners a little bit more flexibility, hopefully increase the ease to develop these types of rental units. Moving on to another type of units, I guess these are really row houses, not townhouses, as I've put on the left. So when you're thinking about town, if you know those developments that are down by the point right next to the Van Horn Trail, those are the only row houses currently in town. But that style of development with more than 2 attached units with common walls, those are row houses, very common in a lot of urban settings. But they're a style of development that is becoming more popular, and a lot of the recent developments that have been proposed in St. Andrews, they actually don't meet the definition of row house in the zoning bylaw because of the way that they're either being rented, or they're maybe condominiums. In St. Andrews, a row house in the zoning bylaw means they are on their own property with the common wall dividing them. But currently the standards for that are pretty restrictive. They actually they wouldn't allow the current row houses that are in town right now, because those are only 8 meters with 5-meter front yards, and the zoning bylaw requires 12-meter width with 6-meter front yards. So, sorry, 7.5-meter front yards. So the proposal here is to basically bring those standards into line with most other communities, and to again allow another type of rental option, or in this case it would actually be an ownership option, but a smaller, more efficient. They're usually a little cheaper to build because you have the common walls. And again, it seems to be where the market is going. No one's actually proposed a specific row house development. They've all been a little bit different with the ownership structure, but I expect that you'll be seeing more requests for this type of development. And if the standards stay as they are now, variances will almost certainly be required. Now, the MR2 zone, this is your high density multiple residential zone. And the only property that's developed in this zone right now is Anchor's Landing. You can kind of see it in the background. And that's kind of your typical 3-story, 36-unit apartment building. It kind of seems to be the typology for apartment buildings in the area as well. If you look at St. Stephen, there's a few like that. The MR2 zone was created when Anchor's Landing was proposed. So no zone fit what Anchor's Landing was proposing to do. So a new zone was created, and that's the MR2 zone. And when you look at it compared with other municipalities, it's pretty restrictive. The lot size is quite large, even when you do those per unit calculations. They work out to much less required square feet, and you can get a much higher density. Again, very large frontage requirements, and depth quite deep, large front yards, very large side yards. And the result is you can get these developments that are very much, if you look at Anchor's Landing, for example, while it serves a lot of needs, it's a very popular place to try and get a unit. There's a lot of empty space on that lot, and the density in Anchor's Landing is actually lower than what you might get if you had a more distributed, but let's say 1-story type of development. So a townhouse development, like I was just talking about, you could get more density. So it doesn't really achieve the result of a high density zone. And that's why when you look at other municipalities, most of the ones I've looked at here are smaller municipalities. They do allow a little bit more. And what I proposed here is it is quite a big difference, and it doesn't follow a square unit per density, square meters per unit kind of density control. And the reason it doesn't is, in my opinion, you still have density controls. They're your setbacks, they're your parking minimums, they're your maximum height. So those haven't been altered as radically in what I would say if you look at them. And so they would still limit the density. And the other aspect that's really important to consider is there's only one MR2 property that's zoned that way currently that is not developed. One is Anchor's Landing. The other one just south of it is a property that council has put up for RFP, and I believe has received some proposals for, that council owns. So council's very much in control of what will happen with that property. And the reason this is really important is this will not allow any of higher density developments to happen. Any new ones will still require rezoning. And that gives council a lot of control. You can make development agreements. If, for some reason that particular lot you feel like is much, if there are ways to lessen the impact, there's lots of ways to do that through development agreements. And this will, I think, help make a lot of St. Andrews future housing goals achievable. So kind of like the townhouse one, there's no specific proposed developments that need this at this time, but it's kind of paving the way so that when one does come along, and I think it is in the town's best interest that they do come along, they would have a much easier time. And the MR1 zone is still it's a multiple unit zone, but it's quite a bit more restrictive, and it makes developing multi-unit in the town plat, it makes it so that those units really fit into the surrounding area. They're not overly dense. There's a frontage kind of per unit density, like you see with the MR2 with the minimum lot area. So there's a lot of control with that zone where there's a bit more pre-zoning or already zoned properties like that in the town plat. So essentially what you're getting here is a bit more of a distinction between MR1 and MR2, where MR1 is the multiple kind of apartment zone for the plat, and then MR2 becomes the apartment zone for larger properties outside the plat. As I was saying before, there's no specific project. So council could say, you know what, this is, these are big changes. We'd rather, hold off a bit. And if a developer comes to us with a project that requires these changes, let them apply for amendment when they apply for rezoning, because they're going to have to apply for rezoning. So that's the MR2 zone changes. There's a few other ones. The one relating to housing, I don't have a slide for it because it's quite straightforward, is lowering parking minimums for apartment buildings from 1.25 spaces per unit to 1 space per unit. That, again, parking is one of the ways that density is kind of controlled. And in the case of a town like St. Andrews, especially when you've got, a very walkable downtown and a business district with lots of apartments in it, and really not many opportunities to develop new parking, it can be very restrictive. And there's some projects that have had to really scramble to find the appropriate parking, when in all likelihood, given the demographic of the people living there, it's quite possible they don't require any spaces at all. So it is a bit of a shift. It's not a major one. You're in a 6-unit building, you're going from requiring 8 parking spots to 6 parking spots. And when you look at your municipal plan goals, they do talk about in increasing the active transportation in town, and looking at reducing the amount of energy that people are using, so fuel. And when you require as many parking spaces for apartments as are, it kind of it can hinder some of those active transportation goals, because it's more space for parking that could be used for other things, and it sort of just encourages more people to drive, which I think, given some of these plan goals, the municipality would like to make it easier for people not to drive. And one of the great things about St. Andrews is it's really a town where you don't have to drive in. So again, there are more changes. I don't think they're major, but obviously, if you've read and have questions, I'm very much open to those, as well as questions on these. In terms of where you would go from here, having some consensus on those changes and the document you want to bring forward to first reading, that would be great. That would help me in my process, so I could make those changes. I haven't really discussed this timeline with Mr. Knopper, the clerk, but hopefully a first reading in January, second reading in February. So there's still time to make changes in there. You'll probably hear some things from the public. There might be some things we've missed. And then in February, you're calling for your public hearing, your views of PAC. So that at that point, you do want a document that's pretty much ready, because there are some changes that relate to kind of tourist season, and ideally we want to have this document in place by then, so that people have the options that they need to have for that. And one other thing that's worth knowing, there's I think your December meeting, you'll be seeing 2 rezoning requests, and obviously it's up to council whether those proceed or not. But if they do, a very reasonable question would be, well, what happens to those if we're doing this process at the same time? And what we do in these cases is we put a clause at the end of the new zoning bylaw, Z 2104, that saves and accepts those other bylaw amendments. So it's almost like pre-amending the bylaw, just if those get passed or not. So they don't, that process won't get screwed up. I don't know if people who were on council before remember some of the challenges with 108 SOFI and getting that done with the new zoning bylaw coming in at the same time. But there's a way to avoid that, and that's how you do this. So I'll stop rambling on, and if there are questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Xander. I appreciate that. Quick one is the proposed apartment, I guess it was 3-story on Augusta Street. Does that vary anything if we were to make these zoning changes?
The only
Is it
thing
about
that
zoning?
would change, it would allow, and so they wouldn't need 8 parking spaces. They would only need 6 parking spaces. It wouldn't change the dimensions. It wouldn't change anything else. And that was one of the variances that they had requested, was a reduction in parking spaces.
Sounds good. Any other member of council on any of these changes? Or any other change within the document? Councilor Michelle.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to thank Xander for all of his hard work on this. Without going on too much about it, at the last council, we asked him to go away and come up with ideas to help densify the town. And I think this goes a long way in a lot of those regards. And it's been a lot of work. And Xander certainly brought a fresh perspective and a more urban vision to this. And I appreciate all his work. And I think we owe him a great thanks. Thank you, Xander.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilor Gumichel. Maybe the next dragon boat race that we have, you could maybe carry for him a little bit.
All right, I'll be away.
No, but thank you for your comments, Councilor Gumichel. Any other member of council?
If I may, Your Worship.
Absolutely, Mr. Spear.
Xander, just for clarification, when you talk about the accessory dwelling units and the square footage, is that the ultimate footprint or is that spread over multiple stories? So for instance, if you're going up to 900 and you have a 2-story building, is that saying 450 per story, or is that 900 like allowed at the base level?
So that would be everything. So it's the gross floor area.
Any other staff or member of council? Okay, so I dare say that Xander, the next steps would be a committee meeting. I'll ask council just to give all of the highlighted yellow, just one last look. And if you have any concerns over it or questions, feel free to reach out to Xander directly just in advance. Just so if there is something major that he picks up on, he has an opportunity himself maybe to bring forward any revisions for the committee meeting. But I do think that gave a more detailed explanation for all of council on what the changes are and why we're looking to make those changes. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Very welcome.
All right, so we're now getting into the introduction, consideration of passing of bylaws and motions. But the first thing would be just a quick council meeting review for December and January. I don't know, Mr. Knopper, do you want to add anything on the memo? I believe that was you that created that one.
Your Worship, I'm just pulling it up here, but no, it's pretty straightforward from what we're requesting. Basically, council, we tried to outline a bit of the next steps here in November coming into the committee meeting and into the council meeting. Knowing that it has been a busy year for everyone, we wanted to look at giving you guys options for a bit of a break. Now noted within the report, it does stipulate that if we do need a meeting, we can always call one. As you can see with the tentative date, but our hope and goal is that we won't have a meeting after December 15th till January 9th, with the startup again on January 10th to do a committee of council. That will give staff enough time, come back from holidays and prepare agendas for you.
Thank you, Mr. Knopper. And yeah, just to echo those comments, you know, this council really hit the ground running and it's appreciated. But you know, over the holiday period, there's going to be people that are going to visit family away and don't really want to feel like making you come here or miss quorum or anything like that. So I think it's, I don't think anyone will ever accuse us of not meeting often enough. So I think a little bit of a break is warranted for council, but certainly for staff as well. But that's kind of right now the schedule. Again, there is a tentative date there. If there is a major project that we need to jump on versus, you know, delay it for a whole month, we'll call a quick meeting, but I don't anticipate that to be a very long meeting if we do need it. But you have the schedule before you, and thank you for that update, Mr. Knopper. Does anyone have any questions on those meeting dates or anything? It's pretty straightforward. And the expectation is it's probably going to continue to be over Zoom. I think it's safe to say.
Your Worship, until the mandatory order is dropped, I would highly recommend that council continue to be a Zoom.
I think so too. I think the public enjoys it. It's certainly easier to follow along and hear everyone as well. All right, so at this point, we've got, let's just jump ahead here. We've got motions and we'll pass it over actually to Public Works. No better person to lead these or his involvement with their environmental committee. So Councillor Blanchard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. So motion, so reference number PW 211107. And the subject is the Environmental Trust Fund application for 2022-2023. So the province of New Brunswick has opened applications for the Environmental Trust Fund. The ETF provides assistance for action-oriented projects with tangible, measurable results aimed at protecting, preserving, and enhancing the province's natural environment. Projects must be eligible under at least one of the following 6 categories to be considered for funding. And that would be protection, restoration, sustainable development, conservation, education, or beautification. Please see the attached staff report for background on the Environmental Trust Fund requests. And for the applications, a motion from council is needed as part of the process. So the first motion is that council moves to support the application to the Environmental Trust Fund 2022-23 for a feasibility study of the town of St. Andrews municipal fleet to convert to electric or alternative fuel sources over the next 10 years. And that's so moved by myself.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchard. A seconder? Councillor Gumashell, and discussion. Councillor Blanchard, this was basically the preferred projects. Both of these motions are the preferred projects by the Environmental Committee, just to be clear, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Call the question then. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye. That's everybody, so that has been carried. And we'll go to the next one.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the second motion is that council moves to support the application to the Environmental Trust Fund 2022-23 for a residential compost pilot project to divert 50% of the organic compostable waste from the regional landfill using closed loop indoor composters. And that is so moved by myself.
Seconder for that motion. Councillor Hurdle, and we'll open the floor. Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. And again, that's every hand, so that motion has been carried as well. Thank you very much, and thank you again to the Environmental Committee. They're certainly doing a splendid job in meeting and obviously bringing things forward to council. We've had an opportunity to hear from them directly, but it's good to see a committee with the town of St. Andrews being so actively involved in making a difference. So, all right, let's jump over. Let me go back to the agenda. Sorry about that. I think we're going to the RFP for the fitness center discussion. So that's RCS 210805. And is it going to be you, Mr. Knopp, or you, Mr. Spear, to discuss this one?
Well, tomato, I guess, Your Worship, but I can lead with it because I was the one who issued it and stuff. But I do thank Mr. Knopper for typing this up at the last minute for me. So council, as you're aware, we've actually, for that fitness center at the end of the new wellness center, we've had it to RFPs twice over the last year and a bit. And either time we got really no interest in it, at least through the formal process for gym style, with workout equipment stuff. And so we're really looking for direction from you, what you want to go from here. Now, things to remember is we got a grant from, I think it's from New Horizons for $25,000 in the spring that can be used towards purchasing equipment, but that money has to be fairly specifically used for equipment. It doesn't give us much options for going outside of that. But the potential proponents understood that, but still there were no submissions to be received. Over the summer, we did have a couple of people make unsolicited projects, from a couple of people within town who had an idea, but it was more fitness classes than the gym style equipment. And so that's kind of floating out there. I haven't had a discussion with them if they are still interested in that discussion or going down that route, but that, we just told them that we were going through this first. So we're really looking what you'd like to do moving forward. There's one thing is, as you know, within our budget, we have a recreation director, and that's going to come before you to approve that position, hopefully in the December meeting, and then we can post it. Hypothetically, they could help open that and lead a staffing commitment to a certain extent, run it, organize it, buy the equipment, and then try to find volunteers or work around certain hours to try to get people in use of that. Another alternative is we have to likely send the money back to not likely, we would have to send the money back to New Horizons, but we could leave it open for fitness classes like going on there. So Ms. Dunfield right now does yoga, and there's somebody else that was looking at other things, could even be dancing. Like I said, people know we've been trying to find something, so there's been no commitment. But if we made it open to short-term rentals, there'd probably be more use for the space. A third option that's before us too is just not to do anything right now, just to leave it for short-term rentals. What has become known, and this isn't a recommendation, but just a reality, is with the local government reform that came down last week, it looks like the council could potentially expand over the next year and a half or so, which means our seats at the courthouse are going to be too small again. That, you guys are too tight working across there. And so we need to find an alternative location, likely in January of 2023. Again, we have the space upstairs at the arena we could use too. We have the theater, again, not an ideal space, but it could be used. But that would give you some flexibility there. And, as we go through the transition through early next year, and by the time the fall, we'll have more of an idea what everything's going to look like. And that, instead of getting into a long-term arrangement, that'll give us an opportunity to take that as part of the equation. Right now, staff are just looking for direction, exactly what you'd like us to pursue on this space that was deemed to be a fitness center.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spear. That was a good summary. Yeah, so basically we've gone out twice and looked for the model we were looking for, and unfortunately both times it came back empty-handed. So really, council's at a point right now, like you summarized, that we can either change directions, we can wait until a rec director comes, or those are really the main options at this point. It's really change directions or wait till the rec director. I do have a question about the 25,000. How much flexibility is there in what we purchase? And the second part to that is, if we do purchase something, what is our commitment with that? So meaning, if we were to purchase equipment and hope that the rec director, when they come, really gets the volunteer base or looks to run a facility for us, if we purchase the gear, are we 100% committed to go ahead with that? Or B, is it a situation where we could, these funds be amended where it could be something for exercise class for the spin drifters, for example? Some type of, do we have some flexibility in what we spend that money on?
The short answer is no, because it's very specific, but the long answer is, if we can get some direction in the next couple of months, we can make an application to the funding partners and see if they would allow that. I can't speak to it as what they would allow, but we can ask. And with the government departments, I find they sometimes have some flexibility as long as it's still aimed at recreation. But I don't know if whether it's paying someone versus buying equipment that can be used will make a big difference. So I think we can sit on it because for at least a couple of more months, because we don't have to submit our reports until the end of March at the provincial year end. But I think we want to send them a letter beforehand, or at least early in the new year, to say, well, our original plans haven't worked out. This is our new plans. What do you think?
Okay, a little bit of risk with that strategy, I assume.
Well, the risk is they could always say no. But on the flip side, and it's $25,000, which I don't want to say is a bad gift, but at the flip side, $25,000 isn't going to be a make or break for the town of St. Andrews if we lost that money and still want to proceed down a certain road, I guess. To be fair, we've got money in reserve funds and other areas we could use. So as a treasurer, I always hate to give back grant funding, but at the same time, I'd rather council take their time to make a good decision and just hurry something along in order to get that grant money.
And I know that Councillor Hurdle has his hand up, but just one last one is, when do we have to make a decision on those on that 25K, sorry?
Like, maybe Paul can have a look at the grant application for sure, but it's usually by the end of March, the fiscal year end of the province.
So through you, your worship, it was to be spent before March 31st of 2022.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Councillor Hurdle.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know this isn't really necessarily the time to have a whole bunch of new ideas, but and Councillor Gumichel, maybe you might be able to kind of point me in the direction on this. I'm just wondering about the feasibility of partnering, say, with the high school in developing kind of the management of a gym. You know, we could teach business acumen. We could, it's, you know, running a gym from my perspective, what I'm looking for and what I think we are all looking for is something that's relatively straightforward. We're just making sure that we're managing a space that has equipment in it and checking, you know, sign in and sign out. So I wonder if it's even possible to look at partnering with the high school to have maybe a class that could be used in gym management or something. I think you know where I'm going with this. I'm just curious to know if that's even possible.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
go
you,
ahead,
Councillor. I can't speak to the high school angle, but I do see, and it certainly seems like a wonderful possibility that I hadn't thought of. However, before we get to that point, we do have to hire a rec director, and if we can find somebody that has some expertise in this area, I know that I was a big fan of the old gym and the volunteer model they had going there. So I think we could give that a go if we were able to find somebody with some good organizational skills as a rec director to round up some volunteers. And I think there is a possibility there that we could have a nice community oriented gym that's relatively inexpensive and run by a crew of volunteers. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
For the committee meeting, I think staff is hoping to have the job description ready for us for the rec director. So with that being said, if we could get that forward, we could officially approve it in December and staff could start recruitment to kind of hit the ground running in January. And it would be tight timelines, but it would give them a clear major initiative to sort out when they first arrive. I think I saw Councillor Heaton's hand.
Yes, your worship. Thank you, Council. I absolutely support Councillor Gumichel. I do believe that we have an opportunity now to take, if we are going to hire an athletic director, I think it could fall under his or her umbrella. I really do. If I was voting on this, that would be the way I would go, because I think it's sort of like, if it happens, it will follow. So I'm hoping that if we get the right athletic director, and I know we will hire correctly, I think it could turn into something good, and it could take in Councillor Hurdle's, where the athletic director could contact like a class in high school or something. Anyway, I just think having the health center fall under the athletic director is perfect, and that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. All right, I'll get some, oh, go ahead, Councillor. I'm just going to get some consensus just to say that I've heard from a few. It's safe to say that everybody would like to proceed with the rec director, and at that particular time, discuss, one of the first initiatives is to dive into this and provide us with some options. So I think at this point, we're going to wait and do nothing, but just a show of hands, and that's what you think we should do until the rec director is there. That's everybody. I didn't want to cut you off, Deputy Mayor. Was there anything you wanted to add to that? Because I did see your hand.
Yeah, no, I just thought that that's the way to go, is to find a good rec director and then possibly use the money that we have before March. But if not, as Mr. Spear said, we might be able to do it another way. But I think Councillor Hurdle and Councillor Heenan have already stipulated that that might be the way to go. And that, to me, is the right way to go, is to look for a rec director, and maybe we can get our recreation facility going if we find that person. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I do feel like this is a particular project, not to say that their resources last forever, but this seems to be a type of project that the Dunn Foundation would want to hear about as well, just because it is offering something in that facility, which they're very passionate about. So Mr. Spear, did that give you enough guidance? Just wait until we get the rec director in, and then have a planning meeting with them and come back to council with some options of what they think would be best?
Yeah, it does, Your Worship. Now, Your Worship, one thing I'd like to add to council is that one of the problems that people who have looked at it have said that they feel the space is a little too small. And so I was wondering if I could work with Councillor Hurdle and Councillor Gumashell, who have a passion for this. We'll just work out what we think is equipment, because they may look at it and say, oh, this is going to be perfect, or this is going to be a bit of a problem to put in a sufficient workout regime here. So if council doesn't mind that, it doesn't have to be a higher priority thing, but if we can just pull out a map and talk to them about what kind of is ideal equipment, then we'll get a better idea if it's even something as a community, if we can pull off in the space that's there.
Does that work for you, Councillor Hurdle and Gumashell?
Yes.
I think that works for all council. So that sounds good, Mr. Spear. Thanks for incorporating the team. Appreciate that. We'll keep it moving. We're going to go now and switch gears to talk about trails. And this one would be you, Mr. Spear, I believe, just to lead this particular trail review. We've got a number of options before us, and I don't know if you want to talk high level to start, and we'll try to see how quick we can get consensus on this one.
Sure, and I'm going to pull up the screen here, Paul. I've already got access to it. So council, this is mostly for people that might be watching. I say we have 20 or 25 people watching this, and I know members of Sortie and the Coastal Link Trails are also watching. So I just wanted to make sure everyone kind of get a summary of what you had before us. So the proposed project is working on the Van Horn Trail, and that's what the funding was for. Right now, we have about $1.5 million in investment available to us, of which 1.2 comes from the Canada New Brunswick Integrated Bilateral Agreement for Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. I'm just using a long name because that's what we're supposed to do when we're talking about their funding. And the original investment was in partnership with Sortie. So we have 2 or 3 years to do this. There's actually a fairly long timeline on this. We're hoping we don't take that long, but just so you're aware, it doesn't necessarily have to be completed by the end of next calendar year. So I know this is usually early for next steps, but this is to put it in perspective of what staff is looking for. So we're looking for a direction on the preferred route from council. Kind of wonder if you want to do any more public consultation, or if you just want to go back with Sortie and Coastal Trails. And both of them joined us in a forum meeting a little earlier this fall, a part of the discussion, and staff is continuously engaging them. So that's really up to you how much more you'd like to be dealing directly with them. We will have to provide a little bit of feedback to funding partners because the application was a little at a high level and they were happy to go with it, but they want to see what specific components are going to be able to do. And then we'll get into this, but there might be where we need to get into discussions with some landowners about crossing their properties and getting into agreements. And then we can go through design and construction in 2022 and 2023. The good news is for most of these trails, the design won't take very much. It's pretty much something that has been done by Sortie in the past with some design, but it won't be anywhere near like when you're doing street and underground infrastructure. So the trail options that I've presented both in the report and tonight aren't exhaustive. This is what's kind of come before us over the last 1.5 years, 2 years, and think are the major components people want to look at. But most of them, as I said, are publicly known and have been discussed before. So there's very little that we're bringing new to the plate here. So following your report that was given to you with your package, what we're calling option 1 is Brandy Cove Road. So that's basically going from the stopped up portion by Cedar Lane all the way to Marine Science Drive through the golf course. Currently, there is a stopped up road there, but it is still a road, just not a road that's usable. So what we do is pulverize everything that's there, replace with a 3-meter asphalt trail, and then with a 1 meter of gravel, because there is a water line that goes through there and power lines. So we've got to be able to get utility trucks down through there in order to have access for those. But so it has to be a little bit there, but you certainly don't need a full roadway to do that. One suggestion that we could have that brought up by Mr. Acton is you can see that yellow line, that instead of going straight to Marine Science Drive where the Brandy Cove Road is stopped up by the golf course parking lot, maybe discuss with Huntsman about crossing their land. So essentially, it would almost be an off-road trail right from Cedar Lane till it got to Marine Science Drive. And we haven't had any discussion with Huntsman to this, so if they're watching, this will be a surprise to them too, to be honest. But it's just, if you're kind of interested in that, we could go down that route, knowing that they support this type of stuff and to be used for their land there, and it would help where their residences are in some of the residential buildings. I think they'd support it, but it's just for something for you to consider. There would be additional costs, of course, over just letting them go down the rest of the private road there. It'd probably be a nicer trail, but the truth is the entrance to the golf course, it is narrow, but it's not a high volume area. So I'm not sure if you could say it's going to be any safer than going off trail. It would be safer to go off the road, but it's not a significant risk along that portion. So we've had discussions in the past about the Quaddy Shore Loop. So as everyone knows, we have a recreational easements called by along the old trail bed. And there's always been a lot of discussions about how to develop that. So CBCL had a hard look at it because we just didn't know what the quote was. It was beyond our internal expertise to do that. And what there's two options here. There's a switchback option and then a straight trail option. The switchback option, if you will, is like you sometimes see on movies where you have roads or stairs that are going up a mountain, just back and forth, basically to make it accessible. That's all it is. It would create a slope that the grade would be sufficient for people with mobility issues to go up there. Or the second option, also listed there, is, and on the lower, is this is past Quaddy Loop, just going on the outside through the graveyard right to Rose Lane. But the problem with this is, under both scenarios, you're using up just about substantial of the whole project money. So you're around 1.2 to 1.4 million dollars. So that's significant investment. Something that would be a nice addition, but it's that'd be a challenge to spend that much money when there's other areas staff feels are more important. One thing we've talked about for a lot is Prince of Wales. Certainly one of the most walked routes in town, you know, for 3 seasons of the year. But it's also fairly dangerous because it's relatively narrow and with no shoulders there. And so there's really 2 ways we could go with this. The original estimate, and we'll get into in a minute, is 1.1 million would allow us to put storm drains in the ditch, which we'd have to do, and then create a 1 meter asphalt off-road trail. So that would be the safest by far on a busy route. But the thing to remember is you're going to lose a lot of those trees that overlook the maples. And this is going to be on the right-hand side if you're heading towards the point. In discussions with staff, what we felt was that it'd be best to keep it on the right-hand side of the road for 2 reasons. A, it is still in line with the trail that goes from Water Street up to Prince of Wales. But just as importantly, the elementary school kids use that and do as exercise several times a year. And that would mean the kids wouldn't have to cross the road. As far as one side or the other, there's really no reason beyond that, whether to include it, that there's, when it comes to number of trees and stuff, that just seems to be as good a reason as any. Katie's Cove Cemetery is one that we should be able to get going under this fall. So as you know, the trail goes through the utility easement as far as the gates just before you get to Katie's Cove. We'd go across the parking lot, probably just with signs. It didn't make any sense to asphalt through there. And then as we discussed, instead of going straight out the driveway, the exit to Katie's Cove, we'd like to go along that route that goes down towards the water. And a lot of people tend to use that now. And, you know, Algonquin has in the past supported that. So we'd like to talk to them. In a meeting with Sortie, while they like that route, they'd be more interested in altering it a little bit because the current route does have quite a slope to it. It goes, if you've walked it, as you know, it goes quite down into a gully, then comes back up. And so in order to flatten that out a little bit, again, for people with mobility issues, they'd alter it a little bit, but that hasn't been talked to with the Algonquin at all. And so I can't say what their support of it would be. But the rest of the trail right from Water Street up to the Katie's Cove causeway and over to this point is all able for people with mobility challenges, whether it's a wheelchair or stuff, meets the guidelines for accessibility. And so they are interested in seeing if that can be maintained to create the loop right up the Rose Lane. Maybe I'll just look at Councillor Gumashell, but Councillor Gumashell, is that trail through Rose Lane also fully accessible, like it's got the proper slopes?
Thank you, CIO. Through the new trail that goes parallel to the cemetery, the slope is, it's not unmanageable, but it's not to accessibility standards, whatever. It's a little bit too steep, but it wouldn't pass the code, I guess, but
Okay.
it is.
Thank you, Councillor. So I guess one way or the other, either that portion of the trail won't meet accessibility, will be the end of it, or just as we go a little bit further, and when you get to the cemetery vault, it looks like it won't meet it. So just for council to take that into consideration.
I will jump in and say that I did bike that with Mr. Doherty, who has a hand cycle, and he was able to go through it. He's a former minister, Liberal, Mr. Doherty.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Brad Doherty. Yep. Thank
yeah,
you.
he rode through there with.
Okay, thank you. There you go, Council. Thank you for that filling in, Councillor Gumashell. So the last portion that we can talk about too that's of interest is the close the loop, is through Rose Lane, going up on an off trail now on Bar Road, and possibly on an off road trail up towards Cornelia Street. There's a significant cost to this, and but that is an option, and I know Sortie has supported this over the past. Our only concern or piece of advice is, from our recollection, that loop doesn't get a great amount of traffic. I'd be interested to see if it's because there's only a 1 meter paved shoulder there, or if it's just too far out of the route that most people are going up Bar Road, or sorry, going up to Cemetery and then walking through the subdivision up towards the Algonquin and not taking that last long run or loop. So council may want to consider that about what the use may be. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a great addition, but it's significant cost. And then there's private landowners there that we have to negotiate with to acquire an easement right to that. That currently, after the reshaping of the road a couple of years ago, the edge of the ditch is the end of our easement right now. And so there's telephone poles there in between the ditch and the forest, so we'd have to be at the inside of those, so it would be significantly back. So the estimated costs at this point are below council. So the Brandy Cove loop, for what we've suggesting, is about $200,000. The Quaddy Shore loop on the cheapest end is 1.2 million. Now, Prince of Wales, I had the high end for the off-road trail. If we just added a 1 meter shoulder like we have on the outside of town, or like we currently have in the Bar Road, we're talking about $500,000 there. Maybe not the most ideal, but on the flip side, it doesn't require in-ground infrastructure. Pay for what's there now, and provide a lot more space for bikers and pedestrians to get over and out of the way of traffic instead of having to jump to people's driveways and lawns. Cemetery Road has already gotten an estimate from the engineers at $262,000, and an in-house estimate for the Bar Road portion is about $500,000. So even the best case scenario out of a $1.5 million that we have, we're about $2.5 million worth of potential components there that we could do under. Now, mind you, we could use the money for completing some of these, and then still within your mandate over the next 3 years, you could do the rest of the components using taxpayer dollars, for instance. So, but we need a priority for which staff should be focusing on over the next few months in order to get construction started on these, and where needed in discussions with private land developers. So really what we're looking for from here is what more consultation you'd like to do, if any, if you'd like to open up to the public somehow and what that would look like. And then probably would help staff if a motion would come forward, preferably in December, even in January, to name the components that you'd like us to focus on in the first phase, we'll call it. And so we can get going with everybody on that, and with the engineers, and get tenders ready so we can start construction in the spring, hopefully, so they can be ready for the summertime use. So I take questions, or back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spear. Could you just go back to the slide that has all the costing? I think that's an effective slide for conversation just to have in the background. It's 3 slides ago.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm gonna have to cheat, I guess. Let's see.
That's the one. All right, Council, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know, not to put you on the spot, Councillor Goumichel, but I know that this is something that's very near and dear to your heart. You've got a lot of experience in this, so I thought that it might be nice if you could kick off with some comments, and then we'll go around the horn. I think I saw a bunch of hands, which is a good sign. This is a big decision. If you look at major projects for this council, this is going to be one of the top 3. There's no question based on the money. So I'd really like everyone to weigh in. But Councillor Goumichel, you can kick it off.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity to speak first. I know that looking over these options reminds me of going to the Algonquin for brunch, standing in front of the dessert table and not knowing which one to pick. They all look so great. They're all very exciting things for the town of St. Andrews, particularly the ones that have to do with safety. Without getting into the whole thing, I think if we looked at some of the smaller projects and gave the staff the go ahead on those ones, like the Katie's Cove Cemetery Road, the Brandy Cove one, the trail safety issues, and left some of the larger ones perhaps for more public consultation, or just left them for now. I think we could give them the go ahead on the easier ones. So Brandy Cove Road, Cemetery Road, Bar Road, and leave the other larger ones for a more comprehensive discussion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Goumichel. And I will say that when it comes to Cemetery Road, I know this council's discussed it. I know the previous one does. I feel like we've discussed that one over and over and over again. And that one was kind of a line that would be the next one that we had in mind. So I don't see that changes. But again, we'll go around the horn. I saw a lot of other hands. Who wants to go next? Councillor Hurdle.
Thank you very much. And please, Bill, let me take over this conversation, because I have about one question at least for every option that we have here, because like Councillor Goumichel said, this is very exciting. However, I do feel that, safe infrastructure should be judged by its most vulnerable users as well. So I think safety should be a priority when you think about these. And having lived in Toronto, as well as being, visiting, multi-user communities in Europe as well, painted lines don't tend to make for safe infrastructure. So I'm conscious of that for a couple of reasons. First one, the Brandy Cove Road option. When you get to Marine Science Drive, as a say your first user of this trail, where do you go? I think that kind of forces you up to Bayview Drive, and unless the trail link is connected on Bayview Drive, I'm not sure it's a safe option for people to kind of going down there and then sort of up onto the highway, as it were, because I think there are signs telling you to stay off the golf course during the summer seasons as well. So would that be the idea, that would link to the shoulder expansion there on Bayview?
So the hope is, I'm just trying to remember now, but I think the 1 meter already is on from Tim Hortons to Marine Science Drive, if I'm not mistaken. It may not quite go that far, I guess, because there's some work to do there. So that would be the hope, that under the trail, you're correct, we'd go out Brandy Cove Road, turn right up the paved shoulder, then turn right towards town, or back towards Cornelia Street, I guess, whatever way we sign it. One of the projects we're going to do is, for sure, is sign it better. And we're working with East Coast Lake to try to be consistent, but we want to get that going there. But the previous council, I hadn't shown this on this map, that was actually the route that was approved, was down that way. We'd hoped, maybe through discussions with the golf course at a future time, that maybe we can borrow a little piece of their lawn that's near the shoulder, just be the 3 meters to make it a little safer. But really the plan was to rely on that 1 meter, 1.5 meter paved shoulder to make it work.
Thank you very much. My second question, if you'll just allow me, is on the Quaddy Shore Trail loop. currently, as it stands right now, do people have access to the easement, or is that discouraged? Is that allowed?
It's pretty much fenced because it's dangerous. So it's as we had that big washout that wrecked the Cove Causeway, I think it was Easter of 2020, I think it was, that we had to replace that, and it washed out significant portions. So it's, people can get through it, don't get me wrong, but it's not entirely safe. And probably there's a high liability for the town. If we're going to open up and make it part of the trail, the homeowners that granted us that easement do have some concerns, because there have been people trespassing that would get caught up where they felt it was unsafe and recovery through their private property. So if we're going to go that way, even as a very rough, we'd have to look at proper fencing and stuff to ensure that people stay to the trail and then take a cut through people's lawns.
Thank you. Option 3 on Prince of Wales, what I'm concerned about there is painting a line for use for the elementary school students, that unless we actually actively drop the speed limit along there and then maybe make it more difficult for traffic to go through there. I mean, I think there was consultation at some point about making Prince of Wales one way. I think I wouldn't, again, if we're talking about vulnerable users, would you want elementary school kids walking on a painted line shoulder along that stretch of Prince of Wales? I'm not sure. And I think maybe it might be part of a larger conversation about how Prince of Wales looks down the road. And so it goes into my next question, which is about option number 5 from the Bar Road to Cornelia. You're talking about, you're going to have to change the speed limit there because it's 70 kilometers an hour. And if you want users to cross the road there, we're talking about more infrastructure. I mean, as it stands right now, the crossing at Bar Road isn't safe, and that's at a 50 zone. So you're kind of pushing it back there. Would there be anything that we would do to make it safer, or crossing safer there?
Well, I don't know about infrastructure, but I do know that we had a meeting with DTI that they'd sent out a notice a couple of years ago, and then when I'd gone on vacation, Mr. Knopper and Mr. Acton met with them. They're giving us a lot more leeway about controlling their private highways, so to speak, or the public highways that we didn't control before. So when we review the vehicular bylaw over the winter, I think we could adjust the speeds down there. So that would probably be the case. But the struggle with those roads have been in the past that they had to approve anything we did. So now maybe we can get into having a yellow light, or a crosswalk could probably be gimme, but we could probably find something to go along there, and we'd have to confirm that with them. But well, and especially now with the way local government looks like it's going to go, they'd probably be more open to us getting a little more control over that stuff there, and adjusting it as we see fit in order to make this initiative move forward.
Great, thank you very much. Like I say, I think this is very exciting. I just want to make sure that if we do it, that we do it safely and with the most vulnerable users in mind. But thank you.
And just one thing, Councillor Hurdle, too, to go back about the elementary school students. Well, I 100% agree with you. It'd be great to get them onto a sidewalk or off trail. They are using it now, so whatever we do is going to be a lot safer than what they're currently using, for sure.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other member of council? Thank you, Councillor Hurdle. Councillor Blanchard.
Yeah, and thank you. And actually, I was going to make the same point that Mr. Spear just made, that the school children are already using that the Prince of Wales there. But I do have a number of questions. Again, like everyone, I'm excited about this, so I'll jump right into it here. My first question to Mr. Spear is relates to option 2, the Quaddy Shore Trail Loop. So CBCL provided us with 2 cost estimates. One obviously is for the accessible trail. The second, and that was for 1.3 million roughly. The second option was for the straight trail option. Wouldn't be accessible, was 1.2 million. What exactly did that entail for that particular option? Are we talking about, again, a 2-3 meter paved trail, just not accessible along that route, or what exactly are we looking at there? Oh, I think you're on mute, Mr. Spear.
Sorry about that. I sound really smart when I'm on mute. From my recollection, I'd have to go back and look at the quote, but I think that was just had some asphalt in there. But the majority of the cost really was to reinforce that trail, that there's a whole bunch of armor stone that had to go on the coastal side of that in order to support the trail. And I think that made up over half the cost. And sorry, Mr. Acton keeps texting me when he has questions like this. He wasn't able to get on. 3-meter paved trail. So that includes a 3-meter paved trail along that whole section as well. Plus, but that was about 100,000 if I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Yeah, he's saying the armor stone was the majority of the cost. So just to reinforce that, and it's something to remember too is we have to go in negotiations with those landowners because the easement's only a meter, and we'd have to discuss with them how the heck we'd access it with equipment and get that extra 2 meters in. Now, for them, it's not usable land. For you that have gone through it, you know it's pretty much a straight drop off from where their property is. They're elevated, but still, it is their private property that we'd have to discuss with them if they grant us an easement and what conditions that would be.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Spiro. So, and again, for me, you know, I do like the idea of that particular loop where it does connect to currently to an existing trail there. But I don't, and I think we talked about this at one of our previous meetings, I don't necessarily feel like it has to be that 3-meter trail. Like, you know, a number of us have probably hiked throughout the province, and as much as, you know, we want to the best of our ability to have as many of the trails that we have in town accessible to all. The 3-meter trail is wonderful. The paved trail is great. But I don't think every single trail in town necessarily needs to be that way. Just like, you know, you'd go hike Fundy National Park, you'd have a range of trail options available to you from very easy, which are walkable, accessible, bikeable, whatever, to, you know, to the more the ones that require a little more effort, I guess, right? And so I'm not opposed to having a range of trail options. And again, if it would, I understand the need to potentially reinforce that trail, but I don't know that we necessarily need a 3-meter trail through there. I'd be open to be wondering, I guess, if there would be some other options to maybe have in there. And so that I would sort of leave that with you, Mr. Spear. Perhaps there's other options available to us that wouldn't eat up our entire budget, because I would hope anyways, that maybe we could reduce the cost there and maybe look at some additional options in addition to what you've already provided us. Just another comment on option 1, the trail option, the Brandy Cove Road. I'm quite comfortable keeping that on the road, that first section of the trail down Brandy Cove Road off of Marine Science Drive. I don't necessarily think we need to go off-road into the Huntsman's property. As you said, I think that's a fairly low traffic area. I don't think there's a high risk to anybody accessing that to get down into the newer section as to what's being proposed. I think overall, from my perspective, while I certainly do appreciate the safety concerns along Prince of Wales, can you tell him from St. John? Prince of Wales. I am okay, I think, with the with putting in the painted line and having a section set aside for walkers, bikers, what have you. Obviously, ideally, you know, we would have sidewalks. I would really like to see that, but I think that again is a step up from where we are now, where it does designate a specific area for walkers in town along Prince of Wales. So that's something that I would certainly be open to at this point. And again, it certainly does reduce the cost and maybe provide us with some additional options to expand on what we already have. I think, again, overall, and looking at sort of the costs that I had sort of put together, again, not really sure what that rough trail, I'll call it a rough trail, a smaller trail on the Quaddy Shores might look like. But also utilize, instead of the full 1 million for Prince of Wales, perhaps the second option, which I think with the painted line was just under $500,000. I think that still does leave us with some significant, a significant amount of the funds available to us. Again, I think I agree with what's been said. Katie's Cove, Cemetery Road, Brandy Cove, and the trail safety issues. I think those can all be, in my opinion anyways, can all be done, and we could move forward with those. I'd like to see that happen. And again, with some of the bigger options, as was mentioned, I think there already has been a lot of public consultation on these things. I would really like to see us, not to say I'm opposed to more or further public consultation, but but maybe just go back and look at what's been said and what's been done over the last little while. I think there has been a lot. I'd like to see us really start to move forward on some of these things. I think we've been given some good direction and good guidance from the public up to this point. So I'm comfortable with really starting to going forward with some of those smaller ones and really hammering down what we'd like to see on the bigger ones sooner than later. I think we're ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchard. Appreciate that. I am hearing a little bit of consensus, and I'll read it back to you just towards the end of this to make sure that I'm hearing it correctly when I hear everyone speak. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Akaji. Here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like what everybody has said, and I agree. I think the most popular one is the Prince of Wales, where everybody walks, but it's also fairly expensive. I would like to see, the line put down, maybe a light at the beginning or at the end of it that flashes so that, there are students in that space, and perhaps that might slow the people down. Brandy Cove Road, I know I was on the council that stopped it up. I wouldn't like to see it open again, but would like to see it used as the trail. I don't think we need to go off-road to Huntsman, as Councillor Blanchard just stated that, the road isn't that much, and it's not. I don't think that trail is used as frequent as the other ones are used. Like the Quaddy Shore Loop is a big talk, and of course Prince of Wales. So I would, and the Cemetery Road, that's one that's used a little bit more. I don't find Brandy Cove Road is used as much, but that may be just me. And I would like to see something that keeps the students safe. So safety is a big issue to me when there's walkers on the road, or hikers or bikers or whatever you want to call them on the road. So thank you very much. And I think we should move forward with the smaller ones that we can do, and then work on the others as we have the money and the time, mostly the money, but the availability to do the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just gonna wait, Councillor Heenan.
Thank you, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, Council. I totally agree. We get to work on the three that we've looked at right now. I'm very much in support of that because I believe we've done enough consulting. We've had Sortie do a presentation to us. We've done public. It won't change anything much if we do any more consulting at this point for those three anyway, because not everybody's ever going to agree, but I do believe we have to, for time's sake, we have to get moving. And I do believe it would be nice to have this started in the spring. And so I totally agree that the three that we've talked about should be a go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Heenan. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I tend to agree with what I'm hearing so far. The top of the list here for me, I think, still is Cemetery Road. We've talked about it extensively. Again, it was on Sortie's list. And the reason that I would have it up, I guess, at the top for me is it just completes that sort of the trail network that's already there. It adds some continuity to that trail. It's linking up trails that we already have. And to me, that has a real selling feature for our town. The Quaddy Shore Loop, again, I'm a big fan of this. I understand the work that would have to go into it. After our last discussion, I did go out and hike it, and I would absolutely agree with Mr. Spear. It is definitely somewhat dangerous at the moment. There's quite a few areas that are washed out. It would take a significant amount of work. That being said, it, to me, would be an absolutely fantastic option. As Councillor Blanchard said, I mean, if there was some route of opening that piece of trail up, at least getting into the negotiations with the landowners to obtain those right of ways, I think that would better serve us doing that sooner than later. We had to keep it as an unpaved trail for now until maybe we, could do that in the future, that'd be fine. But it really would be probably the most beautiful trail we would have. And again, to me, the pure strength of that is that it's closing a loop. For anybody who walks, runs, bikes, dead end trails, personally, they don't really have any appeal to me whatsoever. The thought of going out and back doesn't really excite me at all. So the fact that we could take this right along the shoreline, close that loop, connect it with existing trails, I think would be absolutely phenomenal. Prince of Wales, again, I would be a fan of something along there. My only concern was the idea of taking down some of those old growth trees. That's not something I'd really like to see happen. I mean, that is really sort of the beauty of Prince of Wales. So yeah, in my opinion, Cemetery Road, the Bar Road for me is, I would put that one sort of towards the bottom of the list. I think it would be a nice to have, but again, it's, I'll agree with Mr. Spear. It's not a heavily trafficked area. I just don't see it being sort of the high priority at the moment, but that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. That was all members of council. Does anyone have anything new they'd like to add? Just to be clear, we're looking for anything new. Councilor Blanchard.
Thank you, Your Worship. And actually, Councilor Neal touched on the bit I was going to talk about as well, was the trees on Prince of Wales. I would not want to see those come down. But to add something new here, I just had a question for Mr. Spear, because we have talked about trailheads before. I'm wondering if the funds that we have here could also be used for sort of the trailhead aspect of things, or is it strictly for trails? That was a question that I meant to ask. Thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Spear?
Yeah, sorry. Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Can.
Your Worship, I'm okay to drop the share screen now?
If you could just leave it up for just one more moment,
Okay.
That'd be great. Just because
Okay. So the quick answer is we didn't put it in our original application, but I think they would support that if we wrote to the funding partners. They're fairly flexible. So if that's something, we haven't quite identified where one would go. We've had discussions with Huntsman who originally were interested, but they haven't really committed to that specific piece of property. And I could reach out to them again and see if they would support that, because it was the discussion that it was at the end of Marine Science Drive and the highway 127. Another piece of land the town does have, but it's off the beaten path a bit, would be down at the corner of Champlain Avenue and Bar Road. That, as you know, if you're turning right into Champlain, we own that piece of property that is down below there. It's not quite on the ideal portion of the trail, but it's kind of in the middle of everything that people could park their cars, could access the Rose Lane, or if someone had a bike, they could go through the subdivision pretty safely and then catch the Cemetery Road Trail and continue down there. So we have options there, but it'd be good to talk to Coastal Link to see if they've had any more success or had any more discussions with the Huntsman. If not, I'll begin discussions with them again to see what their thoughts, and if they aren't quite ready to continue there, we could look at alternate locations and see where else we could propose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spear. Okay, so we got something new to add, Councilor Gouverchel.
Just quickly with regard to Cornelia, I have a great picture of former councillor Dan Boyd in a chicken suit trying to cross the road there on his bicycle. Just to point out that that's been an issue there for a while, and he was also a big part of driving some of this trail initiative. So a shout out to Dan Boyd.
Well, you'll have to send that to Graham and Ann Council for them to share on their next town council meeting. So thank you very much, Council, for everybody weighing in on that. Obviously heard a lot of different comments there. But what overall the consensus I hear is let's get going on the smaller ones. And just because we say get going on the smaller ones, we recognize that there's conversations that have to happen. I'll give you an example. Brandy Cove Road, the Algonquin wants to have a stake and have a conversation there. Let's have the conversation with them. If anybody hears any trail that we're talking about, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get a chance to weigh in. I would say that anyone along these trail sections, we should actually reach out to let them know that we are proposing to go that route. When you get into the specifics of it, the way that I see it is we had two presentations from two local experts. So we had the Coastal Link and we had Sortie. Both of them were saying they wanted to go opposite directions. And we know that as part of the Coastal Link, they're going to access both 127. So both those 127s are entrance into the community. So I think it's important as people come into the community that they get greeted in the town limits fairly quickly at what our trail system is. And that's what they were recommending. And there's enough money to actually do exactly what Sortie and Coastal Link was asking us to do. If you look at the first and foremost, the Cemetery Road, the previous council talked about it several times. We have. I can tell you for a fact that people are going down to the end of Champlain on the dirt road all the time, lost in that area. We need to connect that area. It is not, if you're not from St. Andrews, you're going to have a hard time, even with signs, to really figure out where you're going. You're going to think it's a bad sign because you're headed towards the cemetery without even seeing that. So to actually connect that, that to me is a no-brainer. I agree completely with Councillor Neal. There is no point having trails that go to nowhere. We need to work consistently to make it a loop. You want it to be a loop of a community. That's what a trail system is versus a bunch of dead ends going every which way. So what I would, based on the small projects, what I'm hearing is council would like to actually do Cemetery Road. I think going to Bar Road is exactly down Bar Road to Cornelius. It's a nice entrance to town. It's what Sortie wanted. I think Brandy Cove Road is what the Coastal Link Trail wanted because they want that to be the entrance. They're working with Huntsman in order to make that kind of a park and ride. I think those are the ones right away that we should get into. And then what that leaves us with is a big chunk of money to have another discussion next year. We can talk about what Quaddy Shore Loop looks like to leave it a, call it a dirt trail or rock trail that just is a little bit safer. We can have that conversation. Prince of Wales, definitely warranted. Don't underestimate the impact that cutting those trees are going to have in the community. You are going, if you ever did go that route, you are going to have a packed meeting in front of the community. Don't underestimate what those trees mean in the history and heritage of Prince of Wales Street. I will say that Prince of Wales to make a decision on a trail seems a little early when we haven't had a discussion as a whole council on what the master transportation plan is. I think they go hand in hand. And the reality is we're not going to have a decision on that project this year. We're not. We can get into it in the new year, but I think that that's a phase, the next phase. So if council will support, I'll look for a show of hands. I would like for staff to start working on Brandy Cove Road, Cemetery Road, the Bar Road to Cornelius, but also I took the safety comment. I'm not sure which councillor said it. There is a gap from Cornelius to Marine Science Drive. There's just a little portion there. It might make sense to actually put a little tiny portion of a trail there. So when you get off Cornelius, you're going on a trail to get to Marine Science Drive because you will be on the 127 and we don't have that. And I think we should avoid that just like we are on the Cornelius, the other side. A little section will avoid that. And to be honest, it'd be really small. I don't think it would be a big money item. And I think that we can make that happen. So I just wanted to show of hands if that's what I was hearing or if I'm off on that one. All in, everyone kind of agree that makes the most sense. Is there anyone that objects to anything I said though? But this is based on what you told me. All right, I think we got consensus, Mr. Spear. Did you capture that kind of where we're at? I know it's very quick. And again, if any property owner is watching this or anyone has any concerns, reach out to town council. This isn't a done deal right now. We're just going to get staff to start working with property owners in that area to find out any challenges we have, get permissions as required. There is a lot of work that needs to happen for these trails to take place. I will note that the trails that we just talked about have the least impact on homeowners overall. Like if you're getting in on Prince of Wales, you're dealing with a lot of homes. But these ones, relatively speaking, don't have a lot of properties along them. They're usually one owner or two owners that own a bulk of it. So it should be easier to negotiate to make a significant progress. And again, we did for all that decision, we are looking at Sortie and we are looking at Coastal Link, and we're saying that we can do both of them, which is kind of a positive thing. The other thing that I'd say is I'd really like to talk more about the park and ride with Huntsman. I think if we do it on Champlain or Bar Road or Huntsman, I think that if we're going to do a park and ride, there's an opportunity to do it real well with this money. And I will say that if you're on the corner of Bar Road and Champlain, a lot of people from Shamcook, Bocabec, and Bayside are already parking there every day, and that's where they're walking the subdivision and getting on. So it's almost a natural local spot as is the way that it is. So, but we can circle back to that later because it would be good to get more accurate cost estimates of what these projects, those are just estimates. We all know the reality can look a lot different. So sorry to throw that through, but I wanted everybody to weigh in and make sure that everybody felt the same way. But I really did hear a lot of the same thing, and everybody offered some good dialogue on that. So thank you very much. All right.
Your worship, just,
Yeah, go ahead.
just one little thing. I will say that those trees on Prince of Wales, we've had an arborist look at those. Most of them have less than a decade left on them, just so you're aware. We can re-look at them, but the landscape of that street is going to look a lot different in the next 5 to 10 years, because most of them are center rot. And if you've ever gone by where we've taken down some of the trees in the past, you'll see what I mean. That's just not one of them. That's a lot of them have reached their life potential.
Sounds good. When we get into the active transportation plan, we should discuss that, and also as part of that, also discuss replanting, because that's quite a scenic route. And I don't know if you've ever seen it. I know it's not the reason you do it, but I don't know how many wedding photos are taken on Prince of Wales with the trees overhanging. It's beautiful, and it also is a great impression of people coming to the campground. If we want them to go on Prince of Wales more than we do Water Street, and it is a very, very beautiful back street to take when you're going around town. So thank you for that, Mr. Spear. New business, I'll make this quick, and I'll be very careful about the way that I word this. So the white paper, we've all had an opportunity probably to look at it. I will say that it is a very bold move by the province of New Brunswick. A lot of governments have looked at it and actually never made any significant change. This is a significant change, and I think that obviously all change is going to be met with some resistance, but I have heard a lot of positive things about the way that it's done. I don't know about you, but it wasn't exactly the way that I envisioned it. I always assumed that everything within the #1 highway would probably come to St. Andrews based on what we heard. But with that being said, I also see kind of, the argument to and from of where that fits, and, the rural LSD or St. Andrews. I'm not here to kind of argue any of those decisions, but there's two concerns I just wanted to reach out to the province about. First of all, I want to congratulate them on doing something. It is important. There's a lot of positives that are going to happen out of this, but there was two concerns that I wanted to get council support for. The first is we have a tourism accommodation levy board in St. Andrews, and they have been working extremely hard to get a tourism brand for St. Andrews, and they have a multi-year plan. And when I think of tourism in this region, I actually think of Explore St. Andrews. They actually are the leaders when it comes to tourism, even though they are specific to St. Andrews. And one of the things that it's a positive thing is the Regional Service Commission is going to be taking on some more responsibility. And I do think there's an opportunity for cost sharing, shared expenses over professional services. There's a lot of real good reasons why we should do that, but I would hate to see that the tourism levy that this town worked with, the council and staff, successfully negotiated with the accommodation providers. I would hate to see that start going back to a regional fund and basically wipe out all of the great work that we have between accommodation providers and the municipalities working together with one vision, and really promoting our community. I think giving them 1 year or 1.5 years and chopping their legs out from under them would be very unfair to the volunteers in our community that have invested a lot of time. So I was looking for your support in saying that we're all for working on regional tourism, but we think that a representative of our accommodation levy board should sit on a committee to talk about regional tourism, but they are still a standalone body that we funnel our funds through versus at this point send them to the region. And I don't know if that's the plan, but I want to get out in front of it and get some of your input. If that's, we'll do my two requests one at a time. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The second one is in regards to the Regional Service Commission having, it looks like more decision-making power. When you talk about economic development, I mentioned tourism. There's several things in the white paper that indicate that the white paper, that the Regional Service Commission will have more authority. However, one of the significant changes that are in it is that when everybody at the Regional Service Commission comes to the table, so that's essentially the mayors of each community, they're proposing that it's based on your population. And it makes a lot of sense on population. I can see the arguments for it, but I also can see many arguments against it. First of all, there is two entities that out of the 11 that would have majority of the weight, meaning that two entities could outweigh the other 9 if they're opposed to something. And to me, that's not how a council, that's not how a committee can work. The other thing is it's based on your population. If you're the mayor of Campobello, you have 3% of the population. That means that you're going to the regional service commissions with only a 3% vote versus another municipality that might have 29 or 29%. Like, if I'm that municipality, I'm not going to go to that meeting for someone to have 13 times more vote for me. I have no influence in that room. I could provide my comments. I think if everyone goes to the table, they should actually have an equal voice at the table. And then that stops 2 communities from just, making decisions without consulting with the other 9. And the other thing that I'll say is I'll use a specific example. Graham and Ann looks to be about 16% of the taxes paid, but their population would only give them an 8% vote. I don't know about you, but if I ever invested in a company, it doesn't matter how many kids I have. It's what I'm actually putting to the table that indicates my vote. And I think that just having a blanket, everybody has an equal vote is the best way to go. Because if it's Graham and Ann, 16% only have the money and 8% vote, it doesn't make sense. It's not fair. It really isn't. So I just wanted to get your input to make sure that if I did send a letter to the province about my concerns of that it is shared amongst the council. Does anybody have any concerns about either of those 2 that I raised? And last, is there any other concerns that anyone else would like to bring forward to me? Councillor Blanchard.
No concerns about what you raised, but since this has come up on the agenda, I wasn't sort of prepared to speak to it tonight, but I did want to talk to one thing or speak to one thing just to get possibly some feedback, but maybe start a separate conversation with you, Your Worship, and with the rest of council sort of outside of this meeting. But with the changes coming, I don't think there was many changes to sort of the property taxation and how that was sort of going to be handled. I think some people were maybe looking for a bit more there. However, there is one part of that, one aspect of property taxation that I did want to discuss, and it actually has to do with something called PACE, which is Property Assessed Clean Energy. And essentially a PACE program, they exist in a number of other jurisdictions across the country, but they don't exist in New Brunswick because of the taxation structure. So essentially a PACE program allows a property owner to finance upfront costs of energy or other sort of green energy initiatives for their home, and actually to pay it back through their property taxes over extended periods of time. And essentially what happens with whatever you finance, it's essentially tied to the home and not the homeowner. So so all the benefits, I guess, that would be received stay with the property. And this has been done very successfully in a number of other jurisdictions, which allows people to not have to put those upfront costs in at the beginning, which tend to be a bit of a barrier. If you want to install solar or you want to install, other green initiatives for your home, which would allow you to see some energy savings in the long run. Anyways, the property assessment structure right now in the province doesn't allow for that. So there are a number of other municipalities that want to lobby for this through the UMNB, I guess it is. So this is where I'm sort of hoping maybe we could add our voice at our table at the UMNB. I know up in Fredericton, I have a colleague up there, a counterpart up there who is doing the same up there, and also out in Sackville, New Brunswick, and a number of other municipalities across the province. So I just wanted to throw that out, and perhaps we could have another conversation about possibly doing that. Or maybe, again, I have attended one of the UMNB meetings previously. Perhaps I'll make a pitch there as well, but it'd be nice if I had some support from our council on that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchard. So the next UMNB zone meeting, I'll get you just to come along with me if you're comfortable. I think it's actually tomorrow night. If not, we can do the following one. But if you want, you can actually discuss that with them. And then what I would say is if you feel like you have support from them to take it forward, what we could do is actually, as a municipality, pass a resolution. And then what happens is the UMNB will bring it forward to try to get it adapted as a provincial resolution. That's the way that we've had success in the past when it came to getting any resolution across. But I would probably weigh it into them first to make sure that you've got some buy-in, and then we'll be the ones to officially put it forward. But I'd be happy to hear more about that program. I will say that municipal reform did give an opportunity for tax reform, and it didn't happen. I think it only gave us a little bit of flexibility. I think commercial properties are maybe 1.5% additional taxed, and I think it gives us some flexibility to go from 1.4 to 1.8.
Yes.
So, but let's be honest, that's not a significant change. It might be just to say that municipalities are the ones that set your double taxation. I don't know. But we'll go from there. Curious thing, Mr. Spear, do you know if, not to say we would, but if we went to 1.8%, would we get any of that extra 0.3, or does that all go to the province?
Well, no, what happens, your worship, is it increases the assessment by that much. So commercial properties are at market times 1.5 now.
Mhm.
So if we increase it to 1.8, the province would get some, but we would too at our rate. So everybody, they would thank us for being the bad guy, but they would also benefit
yeah.
from it.
And just to be clear, I'm not proposing that. I was just wondering what it means when they take a lot of the extra taxation, as we're all aware, that goes actually is for the province and not so much for the municipality. All right, thanks for that, Councillor Blanchard. I've got the direction I need, but I always, before I send a letter on behalf of the town of St. Andrews, it's good to check in just to make sure that I'm not acting as an individual and I have the support of council around me. So at this point, we're in the question period. Anything, Mr. Nopper?
Your worship, I have received no emails, and there's nobody who would like to speak to you via the phone, so you're good to move forward.
Perfect. We are going to close session, but any council or comments at this particular time? Myself, I have none. I spoke a lot today. Seeing none. So at this point at 8:05 p.m., I'm looking for a mover to go into closed session for the Local Governance Act, Section 68(1)(c), information that could cause financial loss or gain to a person or the local government, or could jeopardize negotiations leading to an agreement or a contract. Can I have a mover? Councillor Gumashell, seconder, Councillor Hurdle. Any discussion? All in favor of going to closed session, please signify by saying aye. And we're in closed session. So I'll give Mr. Nopper a minute to shut it down, and we'll begin momentarily. At 8:42 p.m. I have Councillor Heenan and seconded by Councillor Blanchard. All in favor of coming out of closed session? Anyone opposed? That's everybody. We're out of closed session. Be looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Deputy Mayor Akaji, seconded by Councillor Hurdle. Anyone like to discuss or debate ending this meeting? All right, all in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are done. Thank you very much for your 2 hours and 13 minutes, council. I appreciate it.